I'm Sandy Lowries, and today on the Good Girl Confessional podcast, my special guest is Jules Brooke. Jules is a public relations expert, but she's no ordinary PR person. She has handled hundreds of PR campaigns for businesses and entrepreneurs, helping them to get their stories into the media. But Jules is an engaging keynote speaker and is also the host of her ticker TV show, Shestheboss, which is exclusively about women. In 2013, Jules started her own PR agency specialising in entertainment, but she soon gravitated to innovation, startups and female entrepreneurs, which led her to create Handle Your Own PR as a side hustle. Jules is a woman who is on a mission to support other women in business and help other women to rise. In 2017, she courageously sold her house using the money to develop a PR platform and started teaching PR full-time. Welcome to the Confessional, Jules. Good morning, Jules Brooke, and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for inviting me, Sandy. I'm really excited to do this one.
I'm very excited to have you on our podcast. You're a pretty fascinating woman. You're pretty energetic and amazing, and you've got a lot of things going on. Tell us all about Jules.
Gosh, where do you want me to start? I mean, do you want me to talk about what Jules is doing now, or where would you like to start this?
Yeah, let's talk about what you're doing now, because you've got some pretty incredible stuff going on in the pipeline. So tell us all about it.
Okay, well, I'll start with what I have been doing for the last 12 years, which is teaching business owners how to do PR. So I've had a business called Handle Your Own PR, set it up in the GFC the last time because I had an agency for about 15 years and a lot of our clients kind of peeled off when money got tight because PR goes to the bottom of the heap. And I just suddenly thought, you know what, the media really needs the stories, and these women have amazing stories. How about I just teach them how to go directly? So that was my first bit. And then I did a really crazy thing in 2015 and decided to sell my house, get out of the agency and build a PR SaaS platform. So that's Handle Your Own PR. And I've been doing that for a while, and it's coaching and, I've got a PR SaaS platform where it's got all the media contacts on and people can go on and get publicity. So that's one side of it. And then the rest of it really kind of came out of COVID. So, a little bit before that, in late 2019, I saw a post on LinkedIn from a complete stranger about a guy called Aaron Young who said, I'm going to set up a TV network and I'm looking for people to interview. And I thought, wow, I'm always up for an interview. And I thought he's probably doing it out of his bedroom, but and so my vision for it was, what the heck, what have you got to lose? I mean, I always say yes to pretty much everything. And I went into this little studio in the city that looked really slick and like a television studio, ostensibly to have a chat. Ended up having 2 interviews in a row. And at the end of it, he said, oh, you're heaps of fun. Do you want to host the lunchtime show with me? So that's kind of how it started. And then we went off and had a couple of bottles of champagne, I have to say, across the road after the first one. And he said to me, look, I really need more content because I've only got 1 hour a day or an hour and a half a day. I think he was doing the breakfast news and the lunchtime news. And I said, well, why don't you go and speak to a whole lot of speakers? There's loads of people on the speaker circuit and they'd love to host a show. So I did a whole lot of introductions and then said to him, hang on a minute, if you're going to do this and you need content, then I want to do a show about women in business because there is just nothing on television for women in business. And he agreed. And so that's really how Shestheboss started. I came up with the name by asking a whole lot of girls in Like-Minded Bitches what they thought would be a good name. And I got about 179 responses or something and just picked Shestheboss out of it. And then, so I was having fun doing this TV show. I was learning a lot about television. I've never had anything to do with television really before that, other than helping people get on the shows. And then with the lockdown in March, I decided that I'd start doing online lunches for female founders. And that was just kind of a real pivotal moment for me. I'd literally signed up to Zoom maybe 2 days beforehand, and I thought I'll give it a go. I mean, I knew I'd been doing lots of online talks, but I hadn't done it with Zoom. And so I said to the girls, I'd been doing some lunches in the inner west of Melbourne, and I said, how about we do it online as we're all locked down? And we had loads of fun. And at the end of it, they said, let's do it again. And I said, yeah, I'll see you in a month. And they went, no, we can't wait. And so really from March 2020, I've been doing Friday lunches online, #no agenda for female founders since then, barring 3 weeks over Christmas. So that was really exciting. And I was getting lots of feedback and I was really enjoying talking with these incredible women. And then in the same breath, I was getting a little bit of pushback from Ticker TV, where he was saying, your interviews are a bit too long, your guests are a bit too old. I don't really think that our viewers are that interested. And I said, well, I think that younger women are inspired by older women and what they've achieved. Anyway, so we kind of went backwards and forwards. And the first thing he said to me is, if you want to do long interviews, why don't you do a podcast? And I suddenly thought, wow, my partner is Dave from Author to Audio. He's producing audiobooks and podcasts. Why don't I? So I started a podcast in July, and I don't think Dave or anyone else thought I'd be quite as prolific as I have been. So I've now done over 90 interviews in the last 6 months. And then with the second lockdown in Melbourne in July, I basically got a call from Ticker TV saying, we're going to put it on hold. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, so they're sort of closing down the network. But then I realized it was really just my show and a couple of others. And I thought, you know what? I don't think he wants me on there, but I don't think he's kind of got he doesn't want to let me down, so he doesn't want to get rid of me. So I resigned, and then I went back to the She's the Boss girls and said, okay, I'm not doing the TV show anymore. And they said, oh my God, you have to. And literally within 2 hours, I got a phone call from a girl in Sydney who said, I've booked you a studio in Melbourne. Just go and continue to do them. And I said, thank you so much, but I actually haven't got, we can't get out, so I can't get there. And then my gorgeous friend, Sam Elam, who runs Media Maneuvers, which is a big media training company, rings me about half an hour later and said, I've dismantled the whole TV studio and I've got nowhere to put the equipment. Do you want it? So I said yes, and then my 19-year-old son said, I'll produce it for you, Mum. So it all just kind of came together. And I thought, well, like you, that I would start interviewing female founders. And it started off being Australian women. And then I guess over lockdown and playing around on LinkedIn, I just started discovering these incredible women overseas. So I reached out to them and said, can I interview you? And before you know it, I've interviewed people from Canada to, I think I've put out the founder of the CEO network this morning, to Iceland, to New York, to Turks and Caicos. It's really fun, and just hearing these incredible women. So that's what I've been doing. So now I've got a podcast, a TV show, and online lunches, little group on Facebook. And I have the big, hairy, audacious goal of starting a whole TV network just for women in business with only female hosts, and that we have the full spectrum of women of all different abilities and colors and sizes and ages, and so that we just stop having that cookie cutter woman that they put on television as normally as a co-host or whatever. Anyway, so that's my thing.
Wow. That's a big start. That's pretty amazing. And hence how we connected. Given that my platform is, although we're not completely business centric, obviously my platform is very much about showcasing and highlighting the stories of women who are 40 and over 50, over 60, over 70, and allowing, creating a platform where those, for women to tell the stories that often don't get told.
That's
and obviously,
right.
We created Women Beyond 40 magazine. Quite interesting, before I started that magazine, Jules, and I know you're going to laugh about this because this very much feeds into your story, was I initially thought, I need investors in order to start a magazine. It's kind of a lot of work and big deal, and how am I going to do it on my own? And went out and had this beautiful pitch deck created by an amazing woman who created my logo as well. Love her to death, Simone Norris. And
I know Simone Norris. She is amazing.
There you go. She's lovely. Yeah. And so we went out with this pitch deck, and I only spoke to a couple of investors who were men, who basically said to me that I can't see how that's ever going to work. I don't think anybody wants to read the stories of older women.
That is, yes, how wrong they are. They are just so friggin' wrong. But anyway, thank God that we are there to say, you know what, there are loads of amazing women. over that age.
Extraordinary, yeah.
And I think when I look at my YouTube stats, it's all the girls sort of 25, say 20 to 35 that are the viewers. So they are absolutely interested in what's going on with older people. And I've started She's the Boss at 54.
I love that. And I started Women Beyond, 40 magazine at 51. I started the Good Girl Confessional podcast at 50. So there you go.
Woohoo!
Woo, go girls. That's really interesting. And I think you hit on a really good point there. So it's not just women in our demographic who are interested in the stories of other women in their demographic. It's younger women who are coming up in business or who are searching for things in life, who are actually listening in. And we're finding the same thing. I was recently invited onto a podcast called Katie Talks in the US by a wonderful girl, Katie Welts, and she is in her, very early 30s, invited me on, and she said that she was blown away by the kind of incredible stories of women who are older. Right. And I said to her, we like to call it hard-won wisdom, and she loved it because she said that's true. That's what she gets from listening to women who are older than herself. And something that I wish we'd had more of when I was growing up.
I think that's why we do it, because if we had known and seen, and if young girls now can see these women who are all different types and they're all achieving great things, makes them realize that you don't have to be a pretty blonde 16-year-old who's going to be a unicorn and make billions of dollars to start a business. And it doesn't also have to stay small. So that's the other thing. I think there's a lot of women who set up a business as a side hustle or as something to just pay the groceries. But there are a lot of women out there who are thinking really big. They're thinking, how can I disrupt my industry, which is kind of, hopelessly patriarchal, or whatever it might be, or that they've, there's a lot of women that I see are doing things to help the planet, helping with recycle, helping with all that kind of organic stuff. It's just brilliant to see. And I love the women that have really big dreams, regardless of their age.
I love that too. And obviously you're in the business of helping those women to get their message out and to get greater exposure and to help them build into something that's really big. So in terms of television, creating your own television station, that's no small feat. So what is the plan for that for the future, and what does that look like?
Okay, so to me, it looks like a TV network like Netflix, where you would be able to go on it and look up digital marketing, leadership, stage presence, inspiring women, whatever, in the same way that Netflix has thrillers and romance and all those hilarious titles. I don't know who comes up with the titles that they do in Netflix. But I guess that's my vision, is that you would come on, have a look at say digital marketing, and find 15 shows hosted by 15 women from around the world that are all, each show might have, 4 episodes a month coming out. And my idea is that you would be able to come on those and see all sorts of women hosting shows about all sorts of topics around business, innovation, and technology. So I really want to kind of put the focus on business, because there's so much focus in television on lifestyle for women. And I mean, I was doing, when you do the pitch decks, you do the competitive analysis, where you do the axes. I don't know what they are when they're plural.
I'm going to say axes, but I don't really know.
Neither do I. But when you go into television for women in Australia, you come up against Nine Honey, whatever it is, Gem, something else that's they're all just really soft. Peach, I think, Seven Peach or whatever. They're just such names for women. I think, we want more than Friends reruns and The View, and that is what men, the men who are making the programming decisions, think that we want, and they're wrong, I think. So anyway, my whole thing is stop waiting for men to make changes, stop pushing against what is already entrenched, and just jump out and start a whole new thing. So that's my plan.
I think that's, and I think it's a fabulous plan. And I think you're right. There's really not a lot of that. I do think that, of course, there's room there for, interview type shows for women. You know, we're seeing that at the moment. You know, there's a lot of it in America. Of course, the brilliant Ellen DeGeneres has made an entire career out of doing that before her Oprah. You know, and she had big shoes to fill in terms of Oprah, but she's done a phenomenal job. But you're right. I think that there's really not a platform that just looks at women in business who are really kicking goals and who started, everyone starts somewhere. I mean, that's the other thing that we need to remember. But to be able to give a platform to women, younger, older women who are really kicking goals and have amazing ideas is brilliant. I was recently watching, and it's a Netflix, talking about Netflix. I was watching a Netflix series, Grace and Frankie. Have you watched it?
Oh my God, yes, of course I have. The moment it came out, and then each episode as it came out. And I absolutely loved, did you see the one at the very end where, at the very end of the most recent series, where it was as if the two of them hadn't become friends, and what they did, and Jane Fonda with that
hilarious
face. Oh my God, it's so good. She looks about 15.
It's brilliant.
It's just so fantastic.
My oldest son, believe it or not, put me on to Grace and Frankie, and he said, I've watched this show, you will love it. It's brilliant. He said the writing is so clever. And funny because, I hadn't even thought to watch it. So in watching it now, my daughter's cottoned onto it. She started from the beginning and I'm right at the end. I've finished now.
Right.
And waiting and praying that they bring out a new series, because it's fabulous.
I think there's one more season coming.
Wonderful.
And I think Jane and Lily are now, isn't Jane 82 or something, 83? I mean, It's just fantastic that they're doing it.
They both look phenomenal, but it's not just even how they look, their energy and, that's the whole, the reason I bring up a Netflix show is exactly that reason, is they really went against the grain to make that show that was centered on two women in their late 70s who are now in their 80s, who are dynamic in very different ways.
Doing vibrators. I mean, you've got to love that.
I love it. Start a business creating, first of all, and for anyone who hasn't watched it, you must, it's hilarious, but they start a first of all business wonders about yam lubricant for older women. And from there, they basically start a company for vibrators for older women so that they don't get, doesn't make their arthritis flare up.
That's brilliant. Right. I loved it. I love it.
It's really brilliant.
So good. But
it was such a gorgeous thing to watch, even though it's a made-up series. It's a lot of fun. It's great writing. But what's brilliant about it is it does really highlight how society treats women of that age. That you watch these two women have a brilliant idea and they go and try and get a loan and they're basically told, oh, you're way too old, we're not touching you. Even though one of them had been an extraordinarily successful businesswoman herself and had handed her business reins over to her daughter. It is this kind of, I wanted to talk to you more about that, about this whole societal and patriarchal view of women once we get to the age of 40, 45 and over. What do you view?
Well, I have to, well, I mean, we're practically invisible, I would say. And it's interesting because do you remember Gina Davis from Beetlejuice and
yes.
The Accidental Tourist is the other one. I loved her in that movie. Anyway, what I didn't know until recently is that she ended up having twins when she was about 48. I really remember her doing that quite late. And so she kind of dropped out of television and started the Gina Davis Institute for Media Diversity, and has now commissioned more research around media diversity, particularly around gender, than any institute in the world. And just before Christmas, she came out with the stats that women over 50 are featured in less than 4% of media content. And I thought, I'm not surprised by that at all. I totally agree. That's why things like, thank God we've got Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, who have a huge profile and a lot of money and a lot of influence, that they managed to do it. Because the other thing that's really interesting about that show is that the male characters, even though I love the idea, and I won't give away the idea because it's so good in series 1, but they're so boring. I find that when they cut to the male characters, it's like, oh, I might go make a cup of tea now. And then, you wait for those women to come back with their feistiness. So I just, yeah, I love it. And I think it's really, really important that we start to see older women, because we're really just coming into our own at this age. And, you know, I very much started my agency around the time of the mumpreneur wave, to use a word that a lot of people don't like now, but it was early 2000. It was probably around 2000, 2002, 2003. And with our PR agency, we suddenly noticed all these amazing inventions and services coming out from women who'd said, I can't go back to work, so I need to do something. And actually, I've identified this massive gap in the market. And I just thought that was fantastic. But when you think about it, all of us were in our 30s then, and that's 20 years ago. So it's only right that it's taken us 20 years of bringing up children as well as running businesses to get to around, you know, 50 odd, and start seeing, you know, bigger businesses, entrepreneurial women who are still happy to keep working and, you know, still have that light in their eyes and the ideas sparking. And I just absolutely love it. And I want to champion those women as much as I possibly can.
And I think that that's so important, is that a lot of women, you know, they spend a lot of their life looking after everybody else. So you get to a certain age where, regardless of whether you have children or you don't have children, you tend to be looking after everyone else. Then you hit this age where you're part of a sandwich generation, which is taking care of older parents, possibly taking care of children or other family members or a partner or whatever's going on.
Yeah. Or even your fur babies. There's lots of people who are looking after fur babies, and that's got its own challenges.
Absolutely, that is so true. And I think you get to an age though where, you know, I think Helen Mirren said it beautifully when she said, you know, you get to an age where you've run out of fucks to give. And I think, you know, it's really important for women, I think, if they have an idea and if they decide, I've really wanted to try this thing, I've really wanted to do this thing, to actually find support around them to encourage that, because, you know, really age is not a barrier to starting something new.
Absolutely not. And also that I think there's a woman in my She's the Boss group who did an amazing post last week. She is an Aboriginal artist. She's 60 and she lives in outback New South Wales. And she did this post going, I didn't even know things like this existed. I didn't realize there was a sisterhood that could support me. And I think that's really important as well, that we, you know, that you and I are getting the message out there to say, we champion you, we love what you're doing, and we think that there's loads of other women who feel the same way and who also want to champion you. So I think having that support when you run your own business, you really, really, really need other people to kind of be at least semi going on the journey with you, even if it's just through networking and support, because nobody else kind of really understands it in the same way as somebody else who's running their own business, I think.
No, I think that's very true. And I think that you can be surrounded by beautiful friends who don't necessarily understand, A, what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, or they might not understand. Like, you know, I'm sure that a lot of my friends, and they're all used to my creative outlet. So, you know, this is, I've always been creative in one form or another. And you know, I love them because they just go, wow, that's great, Sandy. And I'm not sure they really understood when I said, oh, so listen, I'm just going to start a podcast. The interesting thing about podcasts is that women have become late adopters to the podcast movement. And so when we see, you know, these really huge kind of podcasts, the Joe Rogans of this world, for example, men were the very early adopters of the podcast movement. And hence why I think there is this perception now that it is a male-dominated field. But in actual fact, I am starting to see the rise of so many amazing female podcasters like yourself. There are so many out there. There's great podcasts that, you know, younger women, older women, you know, and some are business centric, some are crime podcasts, some are lifestyle podcasts, health, you know, comedy, they're all out there. And it's quite phenomenal. Have you noticed that trend?
Well, look, I have to say that I actually had created maybe 30 podcasts before I even listened to ever one. So I was very late and I haven't listened to a lot of them, but the only ones I'm really listening to are the ones that are run by women, I think. So because I guess through my social media feeds, I have a lot of women's groups, and so they're recommending female-led ones. So I have to say, my son is telling me I should go and listen to the Joe Rogan interview with Miley Cyrus. So that is on my radar. But other than that, yeah, I'm very female focused with the podcast. And it's a very low barrier to entry, you know, like it's great for women of all ages and sizes and experience to share their wisdom where you don't have to be seen, you know, you can just have conversations with people. And and you know, it's free to get the apps for Anchor or whatever it is that you decide to use. So it's fantastic. To me, it's like being able to start businesses online. I mean, there is really very little money that's needed in order to be able to set up these kind of things.
Yeah, very true. And it's a really great way to have an outlet. So I get approached a lot by, I get messages from people saying, oh, I'm thinking, I'm really inspired that you've got a podcast. And is it crazy that I want to do a podcast about X, Y, and Z? I will honestly say it's not crazy to start a podcast about any subject.
Yeah, that's right. There'll always be an audience that even if you want to do it on a certain type of bird or worms, or it really doesn't matter, there'll always be someone.
It's so true. And, you know, there's whole podcasts out there that just talk about Disney programs. And, you know, once you sort of fall down the rabbit hole of podcasts, you're quite blown away by how many things people talk about. And you think, oh, is there an audience for that? Apparently there is.
For everything, I think there is.
Everything.
Ultimately.
I think that's true. I recently had the great honor of chatting with Kathy Barron, who's in California, and she is a podcaster. Her podcast is called Women Who Sarcast, and she asked me to be a guest on that.
Wow.
Inspired by Women Beyond 40, she contacted me and said, this is mind-blowing. I've always kind of wanted to do this thing, but now you've inspired me to do it. And she's creating a magazine for female podcasters called Women Who Podcast.
Oh my God, brilliant.
And she said, what do you think? And I said, yes.
Brilliant. Yes.
There's really no podcasting magazines out there that are female-centric, just focusing on the women. And she's really interested in highlighting and showcasing the everyday podcaster, which is fabulous. And so she asked me, you know, my thoughts on that. I think she's brilliant. And I think, yet again, watching women who come up with these amazing ideas in order to support other women like yourself and like what we do and like what a lot of other women are doing is so brilliant. And they just need to get the word out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great idea for it. That's such a good idea for a magazine. I love it.
So
but
great.
While we're talking audio, because I've been really interested in, you know, we had Alexa and Google Home that started a bit of audio, and there's audio searching now. Then we have the podcast, and now we have Clubhouse. Have you gone into Clubhouse?
No, I haven't gotten into Clubhouse, and I've been invited several times and I still haven't joined. So explain Clubhouse to me if you're involved, because I'm a little bit, I don't know.
It's interesting. In fact, Kate Toon, who is sort of a friend of mine, got on it in January. So Clubhouse is just to let everyone know, Clubhouse is a new social media app. Well, I use the term social media loosely, but it is an app that is audio only. And the idea is that it's not like other social media in that you're not leaving messages for people, you're not liking things, you're not sending messages to each other. You just start conversations. So there are what they call rooms, and you go in and Elon Musk is in there chatting, or Serena Williams. Now it doesn't or Ashton Kutcher. It doesn't have to be famous people, but there are all types of people, and it's really egalitarian. So you just go in and have a listen, and if you want to talk, you put your hand up and you go and have a chat. And if you don't want to, you can just listen. And then there's this fantastic button that I love called Leave Quietly. And you just leave and you just float around these different rooms. So I believe it's been in the States and the UK maybe for a year or so, but it only came to Australia in late December or January. They've only got 2 million people on it at the moment, but I can imagine how it's growing. But I love it. And we did a talk last week around what Facebook had done with the news media, and had, I don't know, 140 people came and kind of joined us, and they just drift through. It's still in beta, so you can't search for things. You can't search for topics or for people in that way and go and find out what talks they're doing. So you literally just go on it when you're on and have a little look. But it's fun. And I just think it's really clever. I just think it is a new type of social media that'll work really well as we sort of move. You know, we've all got used to doing Zoom and video. I guess maybe we're sort of now moving into more audio where we don't have to put on makeup before we talk.
But that's kind of really nice in terms of, as you say, that they're real people and you're hearing real voices. And I did wonder about Clubhouse, whether or not, so you've answered my question, whether or not you can actually search for specifics. But I think, yeah, I think it's quite...
The way it works, when you go in, you are asked what topics are you interested in. And so you can say, you know, entrepreneurship or lifestyle or food and drink or whatever. And then it feeds you that through the feed. But you, like, I'm doing a talk this afternoon and I can't find it. You can't go in and sort of go, Jules Brooke, these are the ones that she's talking about. So there's a whole lot of development they're still doing, which is why it is only iPhone at the moment. And I think they're working on getting Android happening. But they, you know, when you read in through their details, a whole lot of their processes are still manual. So until they can get those automated, they're going to be scared. I tried to get on it last week and it was saying our servers are having difficulty. So they haven't quite built it up, I guess, to the stage that we all think everything, you know, once it gets to us, it's a bit like Facebook, but it's not that big yet.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. And originally you could only be invited into Clubhouse. And as I said, you know, I've got a couple of invitations sitting there that I've yet to accept, and I definitely will. And I'm loving the feedback that you're giving on that. But also to, you know, how it's evolved. So originally you had to be invited only. I think now there is a platform, someone was telling me, you can just put your name down and I don't know if you're vetted, but it takes a while.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think you still have to be invited. It is done on a referral basis, but you can go in and reserve your name. So you could do your at Sandy Lowers, you know, so that you've got it. And then when somebody invites you in, you've got the right handle. So I think they're doing that at the moment.
Okay.
But anyway, it's fun. I sort of have gone from being a very late adopter to being quite an early adopter, I think, ever since the iPhone came, and I just started really embracing all the technology and stuff out there. So it's been fun to have a little play on it.
That's fantastic. And it's really good for people to know, because that's the other thing as well, is that women often in our demographic, and when I say over 40, over 50, over 60, over 70, some women are really cautious and frightened of new technology.
Yes.
And I get it. It is, you know, there's a lot of stuff and it moves very quickly. And so that was fantastic that you brought that up, because I hope that encourages other women, if people are invited you in, to have a look. And
yeah. I think it's worth having a little play with it anyway. If it's not your scene, it's not. But what Kate Toon was saying is she's totally addicted. She must be doing about 4 talks a day. And she said, firstly, it's authentic because you can't troll in the same way. If you're trolling, you are speaking out, and there are plenty of other people that will disagree with you. But also, she said it's like podcasts, but they're live. So you can go in and talk to the guests and talk to the presenters, which I think is kind of a nice description of it. But anyway, yeah, so that's just another little new thing for us to play with.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And so one of the other things that I wanted to chat to you about was how women view roadblocks. So what do you think are the biggest roadblocks to women actually not starting a business, but what are the biggest roadblocks for women in business once they get started, about getting themselves out there and getting their name known?
Well, firstly, I think there's a lot of women who feel that they don't have that interesting a story. If I had $1 for every time I work with a woman who goes, and I say, you need to get your bio together, because, you know, when you go out for interviews, they're going to want to look at it and they go, oh, I haven't got anything interesting to say. Nothing's really happened. And then I'll go, so where did you grow up? What are you doing? You know, why did you start this business? And they just light up, and you kind of go, there's your story. Like, you've got a great story. So that's one of them. And in fact, I created a product in Shestheboss where a journalist will sit with women and help them with their bio. And I called it Fig Jam for that reason, because most women think I'm not that great. And at the end of it, they go, oh my God, who is this woman? I can't believe this is me. So that's one of the things. I think the other one that has to be spoken about is the lack of access to funds. I think that we don't like to ask for money to grow. And even myself, even for this TV network, you know, you think there is some virtue in trying to do it on the smell of an oily rag, to keep your costs down as low as possible, not really invest too much into it. And what I've realized over the years, and this is sort of, you know, something I guess about being older and uglier and kind of getting it now, is if you were a guy and you went and did an MBA or something and you came out of it wanting to start a business, you probably wouldn't even think about starting it without $1 million in the bank. And yet here we are as women. And let me just say that 98% of funding for businesses goes to men. And that stat absolutely blows my mind. But I think accessing funds and understanding that you don't have to do things incredibly lean. And I think the other thing that somebody said to me that really resonated with me was, and this is of course if you've got big plans, but nobody runs $1 million company on their own. You never find one person running a big company. So you need to spend, you need to get out there and employ people and grow that way. And I think that's another big hurdle for women. So there's that kind of sense of, I mean, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, because somebody said the other day, we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be talking about that so much, but that sense of I am not worthy is something that women have a lot. And I would say that a hell of a lot of my time is spent speaking to women who are amazing and just making them realize how amazing they are, because we all kind of think, oh, look, I'm not, I haven't done that much and it's not that special. Somebody from the outside will look at it and go, oh my God, how does this woman achieved all of this? And I think, so that's another one. And then the third thing that I would say that's super important if you have a business is to build that network around you. There is no point, even if you've got family and friends helping you, there is no point going ahead in business if you can't find some other women that are going through a similar journey that can support you, that you can talk to about fears and worries that you might have. I think that is really, really important. And I was just speaking to the CEO of a business yesterday, and she said, my biggest thing from jumping from corporate to running my own business is how lonely I am. There's just nobody that I can talk to. And I said, but there are loads of them. But you do need to go out and reach out to some of those groups. And there are stacks for women who are mums. There are not so many for women who are older. So people like you and I and what we're doing, I think is really important, because we need that support for everyone. And part of the reason why I set up She's the Boss and want to do this TV network is that I feel like we have loads of speakers on the stage. We have loads of Facebook groups and Instagram groups. We've got meetups and we've got podcasts, but nobody's taking it up to that next level of being super visible and putting it on TV. And, I just, so that's my little thing. But I really think that having a partner can be a great thing, as long as you've got a contract and you've worked out how you're going to exit, or at least to have some buddies and maybe an accountability group. And there are lots of ways to go and reach out those kind of people and find, your own tribe, the women that resonate with you.
Yeah, and I think that that's been so important. And in terms of my journey for this particular, iteration, the podcast, the magazine, of, as you say, finding those incredible networks of women. There are professional organizations out there where you can network, and women need to understand that. There's places like, She's the Boss, who can help you to create, as you said, your story, and help you to network in that way, because if you don't know your story, how are you going to tell your story?
Yes, that's right.
That is important. But I do think too that people don't, a lot of people are unaware of how many amazing groups are out there on social media. So while social media, as we know, can always be a place that, isn't great, there are some amazing things that go on those social media platforms. So on Facebook alone, you mentioned one before, Like-Minded Bitches.
Yes.
People laugh about the name, but it's actually a really huge network of women who have
massive. But massive. I think but the feedback that I am now getting, and I've just unjoined it, I have to say, is that when I started and there were 26,000 people, it was really generous and it was lovely. And then it grew and grew and grew. And now it's 180,000. And a lot of people are telling me they are getting trolled. A lot of people talk about the nastiness in there.
Oh, wow.
Which is interesting, isn't it? I think you lose control of who your tribe is when it becomes that huge, actually. So it's interesting.
I think that is true. And unfortunately, that's the downside of the social media platforms.
Yeah.
And you're right. My experience so far, thankfully, has not been about trolling. And, I suppose because in my magazine, we wanted to support micro and small businesses in the magazine, and we haven't charged for that. And so the first edition, being Women Beyond 40, we supported over 40 of them. And
oh, that's brilliant.
and
God, I love what you're doing, Sandy. I just love it.
And so we reached out to groups like Minded. There is a number of other women in business groups that I'm involved in online, that I reached out to them and said, if you want to be highlighted, this is not going to cost you. People were really struggling through COVID. A lot of these small businesses were impacted by bushfires, and drought. Well, there's a whole lot of things, and we were like, if you just want a little nudge up, I mean, some of these are micro businesses that only exist on Etsy. So getting the word out and giving them just a little bit of a spotlight and showing these small businesses some love really makes a huge difference, not just to who's looking at them, but to their own sense of worth and self as well. And that's
absolutely. Absolutely. And to be honest, I think that, we as women want to be on the receiving end of being able to see these women, because where do you go find them? I mean, I can't go onto Etsy and go, women over 40, I want to support you. There's no way to do it. So what you're doing is just so important. We did something similar, which one of the girls in Shestheboss agreed to do, and we did what was going to be a Christmas catalogue and turned into a business showcase, which we did for free as well, which was just to exactly like you, but on a much smaller scale, just showcase some of these businesses. But I hope that we will see a proliferation of media around sort of women who are slightly older. In fact, I don't really even care how old they are, but it's nice for the younger ones to have access to the older ones, and for us older people to have access to the younger girls and what they're coming up with as well, because there's all sorts of innovation happening at all sorts of different levels. And then, sorry, just to, God, I waffle, I'm sorry about that, is the corporate women. There's a lot of corporate women that aren't aware of the support that's out there for them outside of the organization they work for. Which I think is really important as well, because I think there's a lot of those women who feel isolated, particularly as they rise up through the ranks and start getting into the leadership areas. There's not a lot of other women for them to be able to talk to. And of course, because I've always been in the sort of entrepreneur space, someone said to me the other day, well, if you're a leader in a business, say a bank or something, you don't really want to show your weakness to people outside of the organization, because it's much more cutthroat there, and they are competing for roles and they're competing for jobs. So it makes it even harder for them to be able to open up and just have people that openly support them, and so, yeah, I think it's really important that we just continue what we're doing and hope that lots of women join us and do similar things, so that we have lots and lots of content out there for older women and younger women to inspire them.
I agree. And I think that, this is the interesting thing about, my philosophy around all of this is there's so much room for more women to get stories of other women out there. This is not like, oh, this is my little piece of the pie. This whole competitive stuff is so antiquated and needs to stop as well.
I agree.
There's enough space out there for all of us. And the more we help women rise, the more women rise, as a sisterhood. And that's really important to me.
Yeah, and because I'm sure that you, and I know I could do 1,000 interviews a year and I still wouldn't get through all the incredible women. And I can't possibly do that many, and neither can you. So we need, as many people as possible getting the name, getting the word out there about these great business owners. And also because people like to give back and tell you, particularly when it's your own business, I think there's a lot more transparency and to say, it's not always great. Sometimes I'm lonely. Sometimes I haven't got enough money. Sometimes I'm thinking, should I be charging more? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? It's nice to be able to talk with other people and have them answer it without an agenda that they're trying to undercut you. And I just don't think I agree with you. I think we need to have an abundance mindset on everything. I mean, even through the Handle Your Own PR business, and we started teaching PR 12 years ago, 2009, I was trying to explain what PR was most of the time. But over the years, all these people have come and joined it and are doing, and I always reach out to them and go, what can we do together? I don't ever believe that there's a finite amount of customers or there's a finite amount of mentors or anything else. We can all share, and there's lots and lots to be shared around. And the more you can lift up other people, the more it reflects back on you anyway. Positively.
I think that's right. And my experience, especially, I'm 51. So my experience in life has always been that I've always found women to be incredibly generous. And yes. As you said before earlier, you touched on something. Women are really quite nervous about asking for help or asking for support or saying, I feel vulnerable or I'm not sure what I'm doing. But in those moments where you do reach out to other women, women are extraordinarily generous. And I will say,
so.
through doing what I've done, and I'm sure you found this the same through Shestheboss and through teaching PR to other women, the extraordinary thing for me is, I don't have to look for guests on the podcast. Because every woman that I've ever had on the podcast said, you know who you should speak to? Right? They recommend other people. This is how it kind of works. This is why networking is really important. But it's true, the women are generous of that, or they'll say, oh, you know who you might want to chat to, who might write for your magazine, or who might have a great story you want for that magazine. People are always so generous of giving us the names of other women and then introducing us to those women and saying, you can, I really enjoy the podcast, but I think you'd be a great fit for it as well. And it's just been kind of a really lovely experience. I think women, once they kind of break down these barriers and allow themselves to ask for help or ask for support, the floodgates open. And when I first went on to women's business groups and said, hey, I've got this idea, I think I'm going to start this magazine. I've looked for funding, men have laughed. That put a fire in me. But in going out to those business groups, I remember the first time I did it, I was so inundated. By the next day, I had over 500 responses from women who said either just support, I love this, wonderful, brilliant, or women who said, I would love to write, or women who said, just tell us more about the concept, or whatever it may be. I'm an editor, I'm a writer, I've traveled around the world on a solo on a yacht, and I've got this great story. Do you want to hear it? Just the amount of incredible contacts that came out of that. But absolutely. The joy in my heart that, and this is really important, as you touched on this before, for women who are going to launch into something, that support is so important. Because for me, I went from standing in my kitchen having coffee thinking, oh my God, am I an idiot? Do I really want to do this? To reading over 500 responses from extraordinary women who, have businesses in all different fields, who are all different ages, who were giving these responses. It put a fire in me and, made my
That's right. And the thing that's amazing is when you think you got those 500 responses from the women that did have the nerve to push themselves forward, because there would have been another 500, if not 2,000 women holding themselves back going, I am not worthy. I'll wait until my business is a bit bigger. I'll wait until I feel like I've achieved something. But they don't understand that they have already. I find it amazing. So we will never, ever run out of interview subjects, I don't think, that's for sure.
Agreed. And I think that, even women outside of business, so our platform has a lot of women that, their stories are not business centric, but, they've done these kind of extraordinary things in their lives.
Yes.
And their stories are so phenomenal, but mainstream media probably isn't going to pick them up because they're not that demographic. They're not young and beautiful. And
well, there's so much that the mainstream media won't pick up. It's kind of, on the one hand, I'm saying to people, it's easy to get in, and it is, but there is so much that they won't touch that is, really annoying. And one of the people that I've been working with and teaching PR to is Rochelle Courtney, who's the founder of Share the Dignity. Now, when she came to me, I said to her, but you're Rochelle Courtney. I mean, everyone knows about Share the Dignity and what you're doing for period poverty among homeless women. And she said, but I just want to get on morning television. And I said, well, I would have thought, it's all for women. Why wouldn't you? And she said, no, none of them will talk about periods. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. And she said, I know, right? Like half the population has them and the other half of the population comes from someone that has them. And I thought that was so true. And so it was a big coup for me when I helped her get onto Sunrise, and I think she's been on a lot of times since. But that again, that is male programming going, I don't think anyone wants to talk about periods over breakfast. Well, you know what? Half of the bloody population has to deal with it every morning around breakfast time. So
no, that's very true. I recently had Donna Stolzenberg on, who's the CEO of the National Homeless Collective, who started, this is the original period one. She started the Melbourne Period Project, which is now national, and it's in every state and in remote places across Australia.
Wonderful.
But she started 6 sub charities off that, so the National Homeless Collective has a space called the Carla Space, which is an op shop predominantly in Melbourne, but they employ, pay paid employment, to women who have escaped domestic violence situations and are facing homelessness, and they pay them, they train them. So it's not just, I will give you a job. They train them to and help them to figure out, how am I going to live out there in the real world, and they are supported in that op shop by so many amazing volunteers. But she's created, as I said, 6 separate sub charities, which the in Melbourne, or not just Melbourne, I think it's Australia wide now, but sleeping bags for the homeless is a massive one. And during the football, people used to come and just give all of these sleeping bags. So to her organisation, that they then give to everyone who needs one, who is sleeping rough.
I love everything that's being done for homeless people, and there is more and more and more, which I think is wonderful. And the other thing that I'm really loving is this idea of helping not only homeless people, but also women helping women, when we realise that there's a gap and that the government's probably never going to fix it or solve it, that we can do that ourselves. I love it. And the other one that we see a lot of is domestic violence. So, I mean, I guess growing up, I don't think I had ever realized the prevalence. I remember reading somewhere once that it was 1 in 4, and I just thought, I looked around my group of friends and went, really? But as I've got older, and it's funny, and you would probably agree, as we get older, that women, as you say, don't have any more fucks to give. And so they start talking about some of the stuff that's happened to them that they wouldn't have talked about when they were younger. And it's shocking. And so there's loads of fantastic initiatives out there to help those women as well, which I think is, super important.
Absolutely. And that those women who have had lived experiences of homelessness or domestic violence or poverty or whatever it may be, have used those experiences and turned it into grassroots organizations that are genuinely doing something to help other women. So there's just, that's what I mean about, there's so many stories out there, and people are like, oh, I didn't know that. Unless you're really high vis and you're getting a lot of attention, your charity or your organization or your small business, it's difficult for people out there. And so the telling of these stories, as we both have said, is just monumental and so important.
I think so too. And also for them to get the chance to tell their stories, because for a lot of people, and we know that as women, there's a catharsis that happens when you can, in most cases, when you can get stuff out. I know, I look at my boyfriend and myself, and my way of relieving any kind of stress or tension is, let me tell you all about it. And he's like, you don't have to. So I have to go and find another woman too. But it's really funny. And to go back to those women's groups, I had a moment when I was talking with my partner, and I just suddenly realized, and I said, the difference between women and men in social media is, I said, in a woman's group, and I was thinking of Like-Minded Bitches at the time, because it did used to be amazing for that. Somebody can go on and go, I don't know what to do. Like, I set up my website a week ago. I've got these amazing products and I haven't had one sale, or I set it up a month ago and I haven't had one sale. And you watch in these women's groups, 150 women say, fine, I'll go and buy from you now. Now, I'm getting goosebumps as I say it. I said to my partner, could you imagine in a men's group, somebody saying, I haven't got any sales, what can I do? And have all these blokes saying, we'll come and buy from you. So I think that really highlighted the difference to me. And I thought, we will go and do whatever we can do to prop someone up and get them to the next level, I think, as much as possible. And I'm not saying there aren't trolls out there, but I, thank God, don't really come across them very much.
Yeah, and you've been lucky. I think there's a lot of people who have, but yes, it's quite extraordinary. But you're right. I think that's what I was saying before about the generosity of women.
Yeah.
And for me now, and especially because I do what I do, that I, when I want to buy things for someone, or when, I do genuinely look for those smaller businesses or those organizations that are female led. That's not always possible depending on what product you're looking for. But, for the most part, that's what I try and do. I think it's really important to support, local when you can, support small businesses led by women when we can, and larger organizations and charities that are led by women when we can. And I think that the more we, as we say, the more that we help those women to build and rise, the more everybody rises. And, those women will build, they'll employ other women to work, for them.
That's right.
It's a knock-on effect.
It's beautiful. And I just feel, I don't know about you. I'm interested to know what you think, but I feel like there's this movement happening at the moment and that there's this rise of the woman. I don't really know how to describe it, but I just feel like something happened during the pandemic and that stop and reset. And I just feel that all the women I'm speaking to are going, you know what? I don't want to wait anymore for things to change. I'm just going to change them myself. And I'm seeing it more and more and more. And I'm sure you are too, but it's fascinating, don't you think? I just feel like there's another revolution coming.
Look, I agree. And I do think it probably was triggered by, the Me Too movement has been phenomenal in terms of women being able to share their truth, tell their stories.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you're right. I think after the Me Too story, which is still prevalent and still going on, and women are still speaking out, we're seeing this currently in Australian politics right now, that young women are telling their
sadly, but hopefully this will actually make a change. Yeah.
Yep. About being, allegedly raped, sexually assaulted. It's pretty awful.
And the other 3 women that have come out and said that they've all had
another 4 now.
There you go. So I mean, for God's sake, surely the government at some stage, and there's been some great articles around the boys' club that is politics. I don't know whether I think there were a couple of articles over the last few days with women going, this is actually systemic. This is not just a one-off. This is the worst kind of misogynistic kind of place to be in. And yet it's the government, and it should be, holding themselves up to the highest ideals, really.
And it should be every woman, every human is entitled to a safe workspace.
Absolutely.
So pretty awful. But this is why we still need the Me Too movement and how important it is, because without it, women wouldn't have the courage to step forward and tell their stories. And then other women would not have the courage to come forward on the tail end of that. So it is important. What I'm seeing though, is, and as you said, I agree that during COVID and during the lockdown, and, in Victoria here in Australia, have had 3 lockdowns, but 2 of them were pretty heavy lockdowns the rest of the nation didn't really quite understand, but it was pretty full on. What I agree with you. I think it was an opportunity for women who are, we're all so busy and we're all so, work's important and this is important and that's important, all of the things. But I do believe at the end of the day, it was an opportunity for myself, and I'm sure many other people, to stop, reflect, and really think about, what do I want to do? Yeah. The idea for my magazine started before COVID, but during that, I finally got that thing launched. And I think it was just a really important, this is really important. And stories need to be told.
Absolutely.
So I think you're right. There is a rise of the woman happening.
Yes.
Very much so. And I love it. And I've got friends who are doing kind of really cool things. One friend went, you know what, I'm going to write a book. I've been in this industry for over 20 years and I'm good at my stuff. And I'm like, you go, girl. And she's written a book. Isn't that great? And I'm seeing a lot more women leaving the corporate sector, especially, to start their own consultancy, start their own business, because they know their worth and they also understand that they're holding like an extremely important amount of knowledge, and they can help other people, but they're kind of thwarted by ageism, sexism.
Oh God, ageism is just so ridiculous, and it's just become so outrageous now that, I think somebody in HR was talking about the stats for people getting jobs just basically drops off the side of a cliff once you're over 45. It is that, I don't even understand how that's happened, but what it's going to do, I think, is drive, as you say, a lot of people to set up their own businesses and to experience the delights of women supporting them. Because when, and I'm sure you found it too, but when I interview women who've gone from corporate into running their own business, they all talk about the stark difference in terms of the cutthroat kind of environment when they were in business, which is obviously encouraged by their bosses. You can all fight against each other and for this one role. As to when they come out and they come to these groups and they just kind of go, oh my God, everyone's being nice. Why is that? What's the catch? And it takes them ages to just kind of realize there is no catch. When you're out there, we want to support you. We want to help you be as successful as you can possibly be. And whatever we can do to help you get there, we're going to do.
Absolutely. And that, it's important for us all to realize that we're human. We make mistakes. Things aren't perfect. It's okay.
That's right. Give it a go.
Give it a go. And what, we keep learning and growing. I mean, I know I have, obviously, there's 2 editions of my mag out now. Yay. But there are definitely...
Just amazing, Sandy. Honestly, that is so great.
Thank you.
You really deserve a massive round of applause for that.
Thank you.
It's about friggin' time somebody did things like that. And I mean, Women's Weekly is really the only other magazine I can think of that really targets the over 50. And that's such a different style and demographic. It's not, it's sort of, I feel very much geared towards the woman who probably isn't in business and lives in a regional area. And that's the only content we have. We did have a couple of magazines that were just rubbish that came out that were just so heavily into, advertised and promotions and nothing really in terms of content. So it is so needed. I want to sing it from the rafters what you're doing, and I will be as soon as I possibly can.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I think it's just been a thrill for me to be able to share the stories of women and to create opportunities for female writers. It is written by women for women. Another thing that was really important. So we only have one man on our team, and he's like in the back end of the tech, and that's my partner, and he's pretty amazing.
Yeah, great.
Thankfully, he knows all of that stuff. He's great.
No, but I have to say, we should do a shout out for those fantastic men that are out there that are supporting
Absolutely.
us while we go down. I mean, my boyfriend went, "How come you're doing lunches for women? I want to come." And I'm like, "Sorry, you can't. You got a penis. You don't qualify." And he was like, "Well, what about us?" And I'm like, "There are 75 million groups out there that you can go and join." But we do love those guys, and there are a lot of us, and that story of behind every great man there's a great woman, I think should be turned around, because behind most great women there are not only great women supporting them, but there's often the men in their lives that are cheering them on and championing them.
100% agree. So big shout out to my partner Michael, who and this is the other thing about this, what I'm doing, and he's so blown away, I think, by the female support and the people who are showing us love. He's so blown away by that. He has actually helped other women who have collaborated with me. He's helped them with their tech and given them a lot of advice on how to get things off the ground. That's in the back end of things, the technical stuff with websites, etc., etc. That's kind of a really beautiful thing as well. And I think you're right. Behind every woman, there's a you hope there's a good man. There isn't always. But
no, and that doesn't matter. And there's a whole lot of women that don't want men behind them, and I get that as well. But I'm just saying that one of the things that I get, because I'm so gender aligned, and you are too, that I get sometimes is, what about the men? And we should get the men to support us. And I'm going, well, I agree. But I actually think that for most situations, men, certainly in business, are up here. And our job at the moment is to bring women up to the same level. So we've got to champion the women for a while. After 400 years of men being championed, it's time for us to, really push the whole female agenda.
I couldn't agree more. And so I'm really grateful, Jules, that there's people like you out there who are really, really helping women to build their confidence, to share their stories, to get their businesses out there, and for them to understand just how amazing they are, and to get them into the spotlight where they really should be. So well done.
Yeah, we need to get that spotlight on all those incredible women.
Yeah. So I'm so thrilled that you came on the podcast today, and I love all of your knowledge. We will share all of your links, obviously.
Great. Thank you.
Women can get in touch with you, and they can join Who's the Boss, follow along, get some fantastic advice, and check you out. And I'm super, super excited to be following along, and I can't wait until your television channel launches, because I think it's going to be massively successful.
I think it is too. And funnily enough, when I've spoken to men, they're going, pretty much like you, I don't know that there's a market for it. And I'm like, I am so friggin' sure there's a market for it. So I'm not going to listen to anyone telling me there isn't, and I've got to give it a go. So
I think fantastic.
Andy. It's just a great opportunity, and I love to have a good natter with a fabulous woman. So thank you.
So do I. It's been fabulous meeting you. Thank you so much, Jules.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine. Available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.